Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert in the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. I'm so pleased to be welcoming Shanda Ceretti to the show today. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, I'm very excited to have you. If we haven't met before, by the way, my name is Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive, and I give people the skills they need to have amazing personal and professional relationships. If you ever want to connect and learn more about that, please just go to my profile and reach out because I would love to chat. But you are not just here for me today, you are here to hear Shanda's wisdom, and I'm very excited for it. So if you have any comments and questions as we're going through, please feel free to put those in and so we can get to them. Even if you're not watching the show live, if you get them in there, we can make sure to get back to you and answer those questions. So, Shanda, as I always love to start the show, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you became a transformational coach?
Absolutely. So really long story. I'll kind of give you all the highlights, if you will. So I grew up with my own personal traumas from, right out of the womb type deal. And my trauma affected me really early on in life. And it wasn't something that I really noticed until in my early teens. And, throughout my early teens up until my mid 20s, I struggled with addiction and self sabotaging habits. And so I reached a point in my life where I realized, okay, there was kind of this breaking point where I kind of did this life inventory and I stepped back and I analyzed what I was creating in my life, what I had generated up until then, and realized that my life was not where I wanted it to be and where I believed it could be. So I decided then and there to make whatever change that I needed to make in order to step up, right? To be a better version of myself. So it started with going on this personal exploration, right? Really learning about who I am and where I want to be, and then reflecting on where I've come from and what I had already experienced. So a lot of ups and downs, but I ended up stumbling actually into coaching because I reached a point in my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do in my career. I kind of reached this wall and I felt like I wasn't fulfilled with what I was currently doing, which was really, it was a big struggle to admit that because I was actually working for my dad, who was an entrepreneur and had a business that I was supposed to be taking over. So I got to have that very uncomfortable conversation with myself around, is this what I actually want to do? Am I doing this for me or am I doing it for somebody else? And I got to be brutally honest with myself. And I learned that it wasn't actually for me that I was doing this. So I started doing a bunch of research, around some of the things that I naturally gravitate towards. And I'd always been interested in personal growth and development. My bookcase always had a slew of that genre. Well, that's probably really the only genre that was ever on my bookshelf. So things kind of just started to line up, and I ended up on a webinar. And as soon as I landed there, I knew in that moment that this was it for me. And I enrolled into multiple coaching programs and schools from that point on to get the 4 certifications that I now have in coaching. So like my title says here, I'm a certified transformational coach. I'm a certified health and life coach, and I am a certified mastery coach. So lots of different levels of coaching, lots of different expertise, but my genius zone is really in the realm of trauma. And, to just touch on that quickly, that was also a struggle in the beginning when I was coaching, because I was afraid to step out into this genre, into this realm and coach, right? It was really scary to me. And I fought it for a couple of years. And the minute that I gave in and surrendered to, hey, this is what I'm here to do, everything changed. It was literally like the flick of a switch. So here I am, and I'm getting to have such an amazing conversation with you and all your viewers. And I just look forward to being able to bring some value to this conversation.
Well, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing your story with us because I certainly do think that's impactful. And particularly, really, what was your turning point, right? That moment that you decided something different. Because one of the things that is so hard about trauma is we build up all these defenses, build up all these systems that protect things being the way they are and us trying to control things. So I guess, is that kind of where you start with your clients? Have they already had that turning point before they come to you, or is that the first step of their journey with you?
Yeah, so I've worked with multiple, stepping points or launch points. And I find, again, my area of expertise are people who have already started to do the work and they're feeling stuck. They might have been doing it for, a few months. It might be a few years. It could be longer, and they're just stuck. They can't get any more progression to take place and to unfold. So that's really where I like to come in, and I get to learn about all the things that they've already done, right? Because, even those little tiny things that we feel are insignificant are leaps and bounds when it comes to this type of work, right? So really just presencing that for them and acknowledging their journey so far. But yeah, definitely the clients that I work with are predominantly people who have already done some work and just feel stalled right now and stuck. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. And I like to start because I've had other coaches on who've talked about trauma before. And sometimes people's experience, they kind of want to say, well, I haven't been through trauma. I grew up in a pretty good house. I haven't been assaulted or had any of these big things happen to me. Do you want to talk a little bit about what trauma means to you in your coaching?
Yeah. So definitely, this is great. A great question too. So trauma, there's all different types of trauma. There's big T, there's little t, and there's everything in between, right? And so really, trauma is anything that happens to you in your life at any point that causes you to disconnect with your authentic self. So that's usually from too much pain, right? So we don't want to feel pain. And when we feel something or have an experience of something being too painful, we cut that tie, we sever that tie to ourselves so that we don't have to feel that anymore. So to me, that is my definition of what trauma is for somebody. So it doesn't necessarily have to be those big catastrophic moments where you lose a family member at a really young age, or divorce, or whatever it is, even the horrific ones like rape or something like that. It doesn't have to necessarily be that. It could be something like um, moving to another town at a young age and having a really horrible experience from, maybe you moved a lot as a child and you never really got to set down your roots. That would be traumatic, right? So whatever it is that causes you to break that connection to your authentic self is what I deem to be trauma.
What a neat definition. That's a bit different than I've heard before. So I really like that. My definition's always been more around what you don't have the resiliency and resources to cope with in the moment. So, like you said, it doesn't have to be that big event. It could be something smaller. And what I'm particularly thinking of is when we're kids, we're so good at misinterpreting because we don't have the knowledge of the world that gives us context. It could be your parents saying, I don't have the time for that right now. And suddenly it's, they don't have the time for me. And it's this huge issue. And then we take it on for so long without realizing it. Do you find that's a lot of people that you work with, that they're not even aware of kind of what their original trigger was?
100%, which is the work that we get to do, right? And in not all cases do we, dig through the past, but it can be super beneficial depending on where the client is at to figure out what that original trigger is, where the root comes from. Because when you know that, then you can almost clear everything that comes after it, right? You can really heal. So, working with my clients, I have the belief that we heal on 3 levels. So the first level is habits. The second level is beliefs. And then the third level is identity. So when I work with clients, we kind of jump around where needed. So it's really tailored specifically to each client, where sometimes we need to focus more on the habitual side of things. With other clients, is more the identity side of things. But knowing that there's 3 levels to work at and not just one is really important, because when we just stay on the habits level, that surface, the top layer, That's why things don't stick long term. That's why it's not sustainable, because we're not going deep. We're not going underneath and figuring out, well, okay, why is it happening? Where does it come from?
Yeah. And not to say the habit level isn't powerful.
Of course.
And it also is kind of the safe level, isn't it? Feels a little easier for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And another unique thing too about my style of coaching is that I also have the belief that we don't necessarily have to go through your past. We don't have to revisit any of the traumatizing experiences. And in fact, I try not to do that unless the person's comfortable with it, because it can be re-traumatizing. So the way that I coach and lead my clients is that I get to meet you where you're at. So we get to work on you now, today, and moving forward, right? So by doing that, I'll be able to learn, and you'll be able to learn what your triggers are and where they come from, just by dealing with you today, here and now, which is really cool.
That is cool. So
Yeah.
as people are starting their journeys, obviously I recommend that people come meet with you and get your support. But as people are listening to this and maybe want to start looking into this for themselves, how would you recommend people begin this journey?
Geez. Well, I feel like that's so unique for every single person. I feel like if you feel like, again, kind of what we touched on at the beginning, if you feel stuck in your life, right? If you're feeling stuck and you're like, listen, I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do. I don't know what it's going to take to move me forward. Then that's when I would encourage you to start actually exploring and seeing what's out there. And I do want to say this. Yes, I am a coach, and yes, I'm a great coach, but I might not be the coach for you, right? So really making sure that you find somebody, a coach, a mentor that resonates with you, that you really, really click with, is super important, because you're going to be dealing with such sensitive information, right? You're going to be opening yourself up. And the more that you can trust the person that you're sharing with, the more relaxed you're going to feel, and the more you will open up. And then that just leads to better results. So I would say, one of the things you can do is just start looking at groups. Like if it's trauma, right? If you're looking for some help around trauma, maybe it's something specific, start looking for groups on Facebook, and, start reading some of the threads that are there and what other people have experienced, because there are so many tools and techniques to utilize that, for like, I could rhyme a whole bunch off now. But I feel like that would be overwhelming. And the other thing that you can do too is that most people, like myself, most coaches offer calls. So if you wanted to see if it's a right fit, then, hop on a call and see if it is a right fit for both of you moving forward, and how that person, that coach, that mentor can help you specifically move forward. Yeah.
No, that's a great suggestion. And particularly because trauma is very individual and personal. I think a lot
Yes.
of people, because it's not safe, they safeguard it and want to hold on. It's hard to talk to people about. And I like that one of the first things that you talked about was the community aspect.
Mm.
Whether community is an individual, whether it's a group, whether it's a mentor, seeking someone or some people to help you is such a critical part of that.
Yeah. And that could look like you talking to a friend about this. That could just be, maybe you've never shared your experience or what you're dealing with anybody before. So, just starting there by talking about it and sharing with somebody you trust could be that first step for you, right?
Yeah. And is there anything in particular that if someone is sharing, like maybe even outside the realm of this being like a huge growth opportunity, but when people are starting to share those vulnerable pieces of themselves, is there a way that you found is helpful for a lot of people to frame it or to kind of get themselves in the right mind space to share that in a healthy way?
I really do believe that your relationship to the person that you choose to work with is super important. I believe it's a feeling, it's a connection. The clients that I have worked with, it's been like a click, like an instant click on that initial conversation, where I feel comfortable with them, they feel comfortable with me, and I'm able to intuitively lead them in a way that's kind of hard to even put to words, right? Like there's this bond, there's this trust that's unspoken right out of the gate, and it's really actually really really powerful. So I really do believe it's one of those things you have with the person or you don't have. I'm not saying you can't build on something, but again, when you have trauma in your background, which a lot of us do, most of us do, right, in some sort of capacity, trust is a big thing, right? It takes a lot of courage and strength and vulnerability to be able to trust somebody. So if you feel something is off, then go with your gut, because again, that is another way that we disconnect from ourselves, is through our intuition, through our gut, through our wisdom. So it's those little subtle things where if we can start getting back into our body as opposed to in our head, because that's where all of our problems arise from, right? Is being in our head all the time. So if you can drop down into your body when you're making these choices, when you're navigating your journey, if you can feel into it for yourself, I do believe that you will receive the guidance that you need, right? We all have the answers already inside of us. And sometimes it just really takes a loving mentor, a loving hand. And again, that can be a friend or a family member. It doesn't have to be a paid experience, but it takes somebody who's going to support you in a loving way to be able to allow you to even just open up to that possibility.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious if you have any maybe little practices that people can do if they heard that and went, oh, it's quite hard to connect to my body in that way, to ground or to get that sense. Do you have
Oh,
any quick tips?
oh yeah, I've got a slew of them. So let me share a couple. Um,
Please.
so there's lots of different ways that we can practice getting into our body. For example, one really quick way is to literally just feel your body. So like stand up in your spot where you're standing and just move your body, right? So, it's interesting because in the world that we live, 20% of the information that we actually receive comes from our brain to our body. Okay. 20% of the information, 80% comes from our body to our brain. So when you think of anybody who lives predominantly out of their head, through their head all the time, you're missing out on 80% of the information that your body's trying to communicate with you, which is fascinating. So if we can sometimes it just takes like shaking it up. So just moving your body, jumping in place, running on spot, whatever it is for, 30 seconds, that helps. A really, really easy one too is breath work. So you don't even have to go as far as meditating, but meditating's great, but I know not everybody's into that. So if you can just sit quietly and calmly in a place and just focus on your breath. So really listening to your breath and feeling, so tracing your breath through your body, right? Just for a couple times, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, right? Another thing is to just like witness your physical body. So if you're somebody who's visual, you could literally just rub your hands together, or you could, this way, you could trace your hand with your finger. But anything that is going to get you out of your head and into the feeling is exactly what you want to be practicing, right? Another way, I'll share something personal to me. It's my belief that one of the reasons that I was able to, cope the way that I did cope through my life was I used music, right? So I used music, I used dance to just get off all that emotion, get off the emotion and not even knowing it. So like somatic experiencing, right? So using my body to feel and emote whatever it was that I was feeling, and then singing like, as if I thought I was a rock star, sing like nobody's listening kind of thing. That's what I'm talking about. So really, anything that feels good to you, there's no wrong answer here. Something that I did recently was intuitive painting. Who would have thought? Intuitive painting, which had nothing to do with being in your head and everything to do with your feelings and your emotions. Some people enjoy going on like a walk, but not just a walk, going on an intentional walk. So for example, you can go on a color walk. So before you head out the door, you're going to choose a color and you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to choose the color orange. That would be a great color to use right now since it's fall here on the East Coast of Canada. use orange, and you're going to go out for your walk and you're going to pay attention to everything that's orange. And it just gets you from overthinking. It gets you from the stewing on those negative loops that run or the stories that you tell yourself. It kind of just quiets them down a little bit for some time.
Yeah. Well, I love those. Thank you for sharing them. And it just puts in my mind, right? It's about 45 seconds we can change our state from whatever it is. So especially if you're in that moment feeling anxious, feeling depressed, that if you can convince yourself to just do this for a little while, and especially one I particularly like is music as well. And just the interesting balance, because you mentioned a song that you can really emote to, which I think is really important if you need to get a big emotion out.
Yes.
And also that fine line of when you go into a song that's also angry,
Yes.
angsty, really sad, being very careful that you're not also using it to kind of trap yourself in there. And so having maybe a variety of let this emotion go or bring a different emotion in and a different energy in.
Yeah, so you can even do that. What's coming up for me right now is just by like stacking songs. So, for example, if you're feeling angsty, yesterday I coached a client and I told her her homework was to go throw an adult-sized tantrum. So that was her homework. So if you're feeling angsty, you're feeling angry, play something that's good, like AC/DC or whatever does it for you, Corn, I don't know, Eminem, something that makes you feel fired up. And get that out, but then follow it up with something that is more loving, more compassionate. So like you said, you don't stay in that state, right? You want to be able to release it, experience it, let it go, and then move on to a higher vibration. So I really do believe that it's important to move through your emotion. That's what emotion means, energy and motion in your body. So what happens most of the time, why we shut down, is because we are so terrified to feel our emotions, right? And if we can, let's just for a brief moment, let's strip it all down for a second. I love doing this because when we put it into this context, it makes it seem so much more doable and it takes that scariness or the fear off of it, right? The charged energy. So energy in your body, right? It's emotion, right? And it wants to move through you. And when we are afraid to feel something, you can picture yourself like clenching, like, oh, I don't want to feel it. And so it gets stuck and it gets trapped wherever that is in your body. It could be here. It could like literally anywhere. I'm not sure if people watching are into the energetics, but it can be trapped in your body. We can go into chakras, but we won't get into that today. And so when you hold on to something and you're clenching it, oh, it stays there and it stays stuck. And then we end up with ailments. We end up with illness and disease and all these things that are cultivated from that point. But if you can just experience the sensation, because that's all it is. An emotion is only a sensation in your body. So think of fear, and we all feel things differently too, different areas. Some people might feel something in their foot. Somebody might feel something in their shoulder. And for somebody else, it might be in their belly. So if you think of fear, if you load up something that, you can remember that has scared you, but not something that's like traumatizing. So for example, if you can remember, maybe like my son likes to scare me sometimes. So he'll jump out from around the corner, right? So, okay, I'm not going to die. My son just scared me for a brief moment. So I can load up what that initial feeling felt like. And for me, fear would be kind of like in my chest, right?
Yeah.
So if you just load up that feeling for a second, replay whatever it is in your head and just feel it. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's actually not that bad. So it's just a way of experiencing your experiences. Okay. And it takes practice to not shut down, especially when you're coming from a traumatized background. But with practice comes ease, right? And I'm not saying that whatever it is your triggers are will completely disappear. But what happens when you do this work is that things get easier. Your autopilot changes. So if your autopilot right now is like a reaction type of autopilot, you're reactive, you can get to a place where you're less reactive. Then you can get to a place where you're not reactive. You still notice it, but you don't react to it in the same way anymore. So essentially, your triggers become less impactful, and that's the goal. That's what we want, right? Is to shift what triggers you. Because the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So it could be one trigger that shows up in your life 20 different ways. And until you really dive deep and start doing a little bit of this exploration, I like to play investigator, right? Put my little investigative hat on and look around. You might not know that. So yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that's making me think of as well is trauma and shame are often very connected, and that's sometimes what has the hold on trauma is we don't want to share what happened with anyone because we feel it must have been our fault, that people will judge us. It's a very big disconnector. And shame is really a paralyzer. Like some of the work I've done with it is about helping people literally move past it, because you need to be able to move. You need to take action and stop this paralysis that's happened. So that's just really what that's reminding me of.
Yeah. Shame is a big one. I remember shame held me back for a really long time. Shame was the reason why I was avoiding doing this type of work, because I was not aware, I was not connected to how am I going to share what I do, right? How do I get to do that? And again, what it came down to was trusting the process. It actually came down to not needing to know the answers. So for me, and I believe this to be true for people who struggle with unresolved trauma. I truly believe this to be a fact. And I might be wrong, and if I am, then that's okay too. But when we experience trauma, it affects us in a way that we then, from that point on, have this need, this desire for control, right? So because whatever it was we experienced was so out of our control, we then go on to need to control whatever it is that we can. So that can look different for everybody. That could be like, for example, a super controlling parent, right? Like super controlling parent. It could be somebody who is, let's say, like a CEO of a company who's really, really like demanding at work on their employees, right? So it can show up in lots of different ways. It can show up somebody who's really, really rigorous with working out, right? Because they can control that aspect of themselves. So, again, these are areas to look at in your life. Like, where am I really controlling in my life? And how can I kind of let go a little bit, right? Because that's what it took for me to start making major breakthroughs, was to get really uncomfortable with myself by being super honest. And a lot of the times I was like, damn, like that's a hard thing to swallow. Like, I didn't know I was like that. But once you're aware of it, then you can proceed, right? Then you can shift. And what I also like to say is that we call this work change work, but in reality, you're not changing who you are. You're not changing who you are. You're more so changing your reaction and how you react to life and the world and the people around you, because you're already you. Again, you're just disconnected. So as opposed to people thinking, I'm going to change, I want to be different, I really want to encourage people to adopt the mindset of, I want to reconnect to myself, right? I want to become, there's that whole, I'm broken, right? And I used to feel broken, but we're not broken. We're just disconnected. And it makes things, again, seem a lot more doable when you can just have those subtle shifts around how to approach it in the beginning.
Totally. And I like that as well, because first of all, yes, I don't believe that anyone's broken. And that shift of change work, but also it's a giving yourself grace and saying that this is all possible, that you can make that shift, and it's just you, and anyone, absolutely anyone can do this.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I also hate to say, but we are almost at time and I could
Oh,
continue this conversation forever, but I
yes.
really want to make sure I understand you have a gift that people can take advantage of today.
I do, yes. This is one of my gifts that I love giving, especially for those people who, again, who are feeling stuck. So this could shed some insight into what areas you're stuck and why you're stuck. So it's called 7 Beliefs Holding You Back from the Life That You Want. So it's an ID tool around 7 limitations. So if you follow this guide, it's going to walk you through what I believe to be 7 of the main hurdles that we face in life, right? So when it comes to limiting beliefs, which again stem from our stories. So go through this guide, get your hands on this. It's very thorough, so it'll walk you through what to do and how to do it. And then there's some guides to take you to the next step as well, to actually go kind of deeper with this work. And you'll find the link to continue on at the bottom of each resource. So definitely get your hands on that resource. Yeah.
Awesome. And the link for that is in the description. So please look there if you want to take advantage. Also, your contact information. I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This was just fantastic.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you to all your listeners for taking the time to tune in. And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Excellent. Well, I'll echo that. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. And remember,
Bye.
every thought counts.
Thanks, Leah.